My pleasure now to be joined by Brian Billick, Super Bowl winning head coach. He's in the Ravens Ring of Honor. Coach, it's been a minute. How you doing?
Dan Hellie, how you doing, young man? Good to hear your voice.
You as well. Thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate the time. You have been a man who's been around a lot of fine quarterbacks and fine offenses over your years. Trevor Lawrence, obviously the number one pick in this draft. Who's your number 2 and number 3 when you watch these guys?
Yeah, it's an interesting group. You know, you've got the 5, and it's a very diverse group in terms of the schools, their athleticism, their experience, their base. So it's an interesting, diverse group to choose from. Zach Wilson appears to have, and I think it looks like maybe the Jets are going to take Zach Wilson. He looks to be the total package. They all look like that. You know, they should be able to play in the NFL. Having said that, 50% of the players taken in the first round at quarterback bust. I mean, that's just a fact. And so the question is, which of these guys? There's no reason this group should not be all good quarterbacks. Of course, there was no reason why Jamarcus Russell and Vince Young and Achilles Smith and Joey Harrington and the list goes on, why they shouldn't have been good pros. So it's going to be interesting to see the order they come off.
So when you're building a team, I've had this debate many times with friends and colleagues over the years. Ideally, you find your young quarterback, you build the team around him. However, there are certain times when you build the team and then you plop the young quarterback in. Is that something doable, or is having your young quarterback first much more preferential if you are a team builder or a head coach, as you were?
Yeah, it's tougher to do the latter. You know, you can see why New York and I concur that sending Sam Darnold to Carolina made sense because Robert Saleh comes in. I had a chance to visit with him the other day on a podcast that I do, Coach to Coach, and that's usually the formula that when you come in as a coach, if you can get your quarterback, unless there's one there already, but if you need one, to have it right when you get started, and then you build around him. The problem is if you start to build the team and you try to plop them in later, you're going to go through the ups and downs of a young quarterback, and you may not last. We've seen that story time and time again. So, yeah, I do think it makes a difference that if you're going to pick a young quarterback, unless you're an established team, an established head coach that is firm in where you're at, if you're just starting out, you want to start with that young quarterback. That's exactly why I think Urban Meyer took the Jacksonville job, because of his ability to begin with Trevor Lawrence, and I think probably one of the reasons that Robert Saleh was drawn toward the Jets job, having that second overall pick, and could start that process together with his young quarterback.
Dan Hellie filling in for Rich Eisen, talking to Super Bowl winning head coach Brian Billick, who has authored a book on finding the ideal NFL quarterback. So who better to talk to in this draft where every NFL team seemingly so thirsty to find that franchise quarterback, and we're going to see 3 go 1, 2, 3. That's only happened twice before in NFL history. And you mentioned the 50% bust rate. It was 1971. It was 1999. And there were 6 quarterbacks taken, 3 in the first 3 picks of each of those drafts. And 3 made it and 3 didn't. So there's your 50% bust rate right here. If you're the Falcons, Brian, and you have the 4th overall pick and you have the opportunity to potentially find a future franchise quarterback who could sit for a year behind Matt Ryan, or take maybe the most dangerous offensive weapon in the draft in Kyle Pitts, what do you do?
Yeah, I still think Matt Ryan can play, and I think the Atlanta Falcons can be a good football team. We just said you're a first-time coach. Now's the time to start with a young quarterback. I get that, and if Atlanta wants to do that, fine. Let Matt Ryan go someplace else, and there'll be a lot of suitors. The idea of letting him, we're going to draft a guy, we're going to use that first pick not to make the team better, but to draft a guy, not play him, and now let Matt Ryan continue to take it on, that typically doesn't go well. I mean, you can look at Kansas City when they did with Patrick Mahomes between Alex Smith, and you look at Jordan Love in Green Bay in behind Aaron Rodgers, but those are 2 good football teams. Atlanta's not a good football team right now. So to put in, no matter who they take, if they take one of these quarterbacks, he's going to start at some point. That's just the way it works. And for Matt Ryan to be that placeholder, I just don't think it's in Atlanta's best interest to do that. I don't think it's Matt Ryan's best interest. If you want to go that route, and I can certainly see that, then let Matt Ryan go someplace else, and there'll be a long line of suitors that wanting to have Matt Ryan.
So many have said that the draft starts at number 4, right? Where the Falcons are, because we know that quarterbacks are going to go 1, 2, 3. Is there a most interesting pick in this draft beyond the Atlanta pick at 4? A lot of people have also talked about the fact that the Panthers, despite the fact they've traded for Sam Darnold, could draft a quarterback. Somebody's probably going to move up into the top 10 to draft one of these guys. To you, what's the most interesting scenario or team there in the top half of the first round?
Well, obviously the quarterback drives that, and what you just laid out will be interesting. If Carolina takes a quarterback after trading for Sam Bradford, that's going to be a cluster. I mean, that's just not good. I realize it's not a huge cost on their part because they're really kind of paying him like a backup, so that works. But to me, that's just not a good. If you're going to take the young guy, then take the young guy and let him be the guy and build going forward with that. What's interesting is you look at the NFC East with Dallas, New York, and Philadelphia at 10, 11, and 12. Because of all these quarterbacks getting pulled up, there's some good top 5 blue chip talent. Whether it's the 2 tackles, Slater and Sewell, whether it's, like you say, Kyle Pitts, whether it's those good Jamar Chase,
right,
or Devontae Smith, there's some pretty good top 5 talents getting pushed back to that NFC lineup of Dallas, New York, and Philadelphia that make it very, very interesting and could make it even not for the quarterback for someone wanted to jump up if let's say Carolina decides no, we're not going to take a quarterback. We're going to go with Sam Darnold. Someone wants to jump up and pick up one of those quarterbacks. It presents them an opportunity now to pick up still maybe a top 5 or top 10 talent later on back. So that movement, you're exactly right in pointing it out. At Detroit, Carolina, and Denver, that's going to be very interesting to see where that falls.
Yeah, to your point about really good players falling, look on the defensive side of the ball. There might not be a defensive player picked until 11 or 12, and you could get a guy like Micah Parsons, who might be the best defensive player in this draft. So that's going to be fascinating to see. I'm fascinated by the draft rooms and what goes on behind the scenes. And you've been in many of these over the years and involved in many drafts from your days in Minnesota to your time in Baltimore as the head coach. And I believe you were in Minnesota when you guys drafted Randy Moss, correct, Coach?
Yeah. Sure was.
Was that your single greatest draft pick of all time?
That was pretty good. I remember Denny Green came to me, and Denny Green, God rest his soul, was the best evaluator of talent of any coach I've ever been around. Would have been a great general manager, and ran the draft beautifully. And I remember when he came to me, he said, "Brian, we're going to get Randy Moss." I think we were 21 or 22, and I'm 21. Thinking, well, okay. The old man's lost it. There's no way Randy Moss is going to fall. I'd done my homework, even though I knew there's no way he's going to get there.
Right.
Once he got past Dallas at 10 or 11, there was a free fall, and all of a sudden now at 21, we get a Randy Moss. And it was, it was interesting. Chris Carter called me, and he had been working out with Chris Carter. Chris Carter used to have a workout camp.
Down in Boca, the FAST program. I remember that.
Yeah, and he called, and he said, "Brian, this is unbelievable. You can't believe how good this guy is." I says, "No, Chris is unbelievable. I'm looking at the film right now. We're going to be able to do this and that." He goes, "Brian, no, listen to me. You have no idea how good this kid is." And Chris saw it then. And so, that was one of the special draft days to be able to get Randy Moss at 21.
I'm looking at the numbers here. His rookie year, holy cow, was 1998. Randy Moss had 69 catches. All right, that's okay. For 1,300 yards and 17 touchdowns. Yeah. You talked about the guy that could take the top off the deep. And keep in mind now, I also had Hall of Famer Chris Carter for that underneath in the slot. I had Robert Smith in the backfield, Randall Cunningham at quarterback. Was Jake Reed there?
We had some guys now. Great offensive line. I mean, we had some weapons. Defenses just didn't know what, because you had to start accounting for Randy. So you had to back up. Well, we could wear you out with Chris underneath or run the ball, and Randy was unbelievable that rookie year.
Oh, what an incredible player he was. So you get to Baltimore. What do you remember most about your time at Baltimore in terms of being in the draft rooms and picking guys? I'm assuming Ed Reed was probably your best pick there, because Ray Lewis had already arrived, right?
Yeah, no, Ozzie Newsome in the group, whether it was Phil Savage or Eric DeCosta, did such an incredible job. And you asked about the draft room. if you do your work right, it's a very calm day. There's not like, it's not like in the movie Draft Day with
Draft
Kevin
Day.
Costner,
Yeah.
where they consolidated an entire season into like, this guy did all this in one day. He did that evaluation, he did this trade. This doesn't work that way. All that work has already been done. You've set the table. Now it's just a matter of pulling the trigger. If you want to move up, move back. You've done your evaluations. Your guys are going to be there. There may be some surprises thrown at you. Very not likely in the first round. Those conversations tend to get a little more in-depth later on, because now you have, the difference between the 10th player in the draft and the 25th player in the draft could be substantial, and it's easy to quantify. But the difference between the 50th pick in the draft and the 70th pick in the draft may not be as clear-cut, and now you also have some needs. So now, you begin to negotiate the ranking on the board. Well, we don't really need a lineman, and that's the next highest-rated guy, but this defensive lineman who we do need isn't rated quite as high, but almost. So do you go with the defense? So that's where some of the conversations become a little more in day 2 and 3.
Well, and you were lucky enough to be a part of an organization that was among the elite in terms of the structure in the NFL with the Ravens. Ozzie and those guys in the front office were are as good as it gets. How much input did you have as a head coach? And you won early. You won a Super Bowl early in your tenure there. Did you have more after you had a little more sway and swagger in that room after winning the Super Bowl?
Well, and Ozzie was a great partner, and we did work like a partnership. I viewed my job to be the guy that kind of stirred up. I mean, we had a structure, and Ozzie was one of the best listeners I've ever been around. So he sought all of the input from coaches and scouts alike, and it was a constant process. I viewed my job as to kind of stir it up a little bit, to challenge one of the coaches or the personnel guys on their guy. They're selling him and talking about how good he is. And I may think the same thing, but I may, I'm not seeing it. I'm not convinced. Show me the tape. I wanted to see the courage of his conviction. And with Ozzie, I would pose questions. Tell me more about this guy. Tell me more about that guy to get, a little dig a little deeper. And although it got to the point, it was usually about this time, maybe even a little earlier in the week, where kind of like with your wife, when you get that look like, okay, I've had enough, we're done talking about it. I would, about Monday or Tuesday, I'd get that look from Ozzie like, okay, we're done discussing it. We're set.
What year was it when you were in Baltimore? I believe it was 2003, and the Vikings missed their first-round pick because they were trying to work out a trade with you. Do you remember that?
Yeah, it was all around Byron Leftwich, and Jacksonville wanted to move up. We were all trying to move to Minnesota to get Byron Leftwich, and thought we had a deal. And then it was they were delaying, and Mike Tice couldn't pull the trigger, and the cards are being pulled in. So as it turned up, Jacksonville ends up there. Minnesota falls, but then they miss their pick because it was such a confusing. We actually had the card turned in, but it didn't get communicated properly. They've since changed the process.
Right.
So it was a bit of a cluster. And the guy we wanted, I remember very specifically, Terrell Suggs was a guy that when we would do the reading on Terrell Suggs, it would kind of be, okay, yeah, that's fine. Well, there's no way we're sitting at whatever we were backed up there. We weren't going to get Terrell Suggs. He's not going to be available then, so let's move on. And all of a sudden we thought that much of him. We thought he was a top 5 blue chip player. So all of a sudden this thing's going on, and then all of a sudden Minnesota is on the clock, and we're thinking, yeah, now we don't have Byron Leftwich. We don't have, and now there's that next pick, and we're thinking, oh my God, what if they take? And they don't. They delay it. We end up getting Suggs, and then we scramble around and later on take Kyle Bowler. It wasn't until later in the day where we kind of paused and looked up and go, wait a minute, are you kidding me? We got Terrell Suggs? It was kind of, just the whole way it went down was really unique.
Yeah, it's just, you could make movie after movie about some of these draft rooms over the years, and we've certainly seen one in draft day. You brought up Jacksonville. I just saw a tweet from James Palmer at NFL Network talking about Urban Meyer, and Urban basically saying we can't screw this up. We have 5 picks in the first 65. It's a historic draft. We have to get this right. What's the biggest challenge for Urban, spending his whole career in the college ranks? You coached in college prior to the NFL. What's going to be the biggest challenge for him in Jacksonville this year?
Well, I had a chance to visit with Urban on the podcast I do, Coach to Coach, and it was fast. I've known Urban for years, and he's ready for this. There's no question. He's an outstanding coach, and coaching is coaching. But it is different, obviously, the group you're dealing with, the professional. Yeah, you have young players, but you're also going to have 30 and 35-year-old veterans that have got families and side businesses. And so dealing with the pro player mentality and the fact that you're dealing with those grown men, that's probably the biggest adjustment. And he'll do a great job with it because you obviously you want to be fair. You're going to treat everybody fairly, but you're not going to treat everybody the same. You just don't. You're not going to treat a longtime veteran and a four-time Pro Bowler the same way you do a rookie. You'll treat them fairly, but differently. And so getting used to that and the fact that, he's been at some pretty good programs where they look at the top talent on their board and they can get a whole bunch of it, that top 150. You're right. They have a lot of picks, and he's going to look at his top 150 players, and they look pretty good. But those players come flying off that board. And all of a sudden it can look like pretty slim pickings. So it's a little bit different in terms of trying to recruit them to great places like Florida and Ohio State. And now you got to stand in line to pick the players you want.
7 years at Ohio State, he only lost 9 times. Urban Meyer could lose 9 times in his first season in Jacksonville. So that's going to take some getting used to, I think, for him, at least in this first year as he's building the program there. If you were in San Francisco and you're Kyle Shanahan, and every time your name pops up, we show the title of your book, the search, the Q factor of the elusive search for a great NFL quarterback. Mac Jones is kind of the safe pick and the way that they're leaning right now. Or do you go after a guy like Trey Lance who has unbelievable upside when you have, a veteran quarterback there in Jimmy G who could kind of shepherd him through that process? What do you do if you're San Francisco?
It's going to be interesting. I know his dad, Mike Shanahan, a longtime coach in the league,
sure,
and outstanding with quarterbacks, and is working with them as well. I don't know. Mac Jones concerns me. The number 3 pick, you don't take a guy that can work the system, a system quarterback. You take a guy in the early first round, there's got to be something special about them, and that's what I don't know about Mac Jones. And it's not fair because we just don't know. Mac Jones, limited time starting. He played behind the best offensive line in football, throwing the best tandem receivers in college football, turning around and arguably handing off to the best running back in football. So he's never really had to put it on his shoulders. We don't know that he can't do it. We just haven't seen it. So that's the concern I would have for a Mac Jones. Trey Lance, you're right. He may have the biggest upside, but he's got the farthest way to go as well. So it's going to be interesting to what they do. I will tell you this via the Q factor. At the end of the day, and I've heard it from any number of people, whether it was Ron Wolf, whether it was Bill Polian, people that have been doing this for a long, long time, there has to be something special about a guy you take. They all have the abilities, like we said, and that's without question. But there's a lot, that 50-50 equation. There's a whole list of guys that had the ability, should have been first-round, studs that ended up being busts. And the list goes on, from Jamarcus Russell to Vince Young to Joey Harrington to Achilles Smith to Ryan Leaf. I mean, the list goes on and on. These guys, there's no question these guys should be good. I don't know what's special about Mac Jones that would make you take him at number 3.
Yeah, that is a fascinating pick there. And then you have Atlanta coming up at 4. Dan Hellie on the Rich Eisen Show, filling in for Rich, who's in Cleveland. We're going to be talking with him in just a moment. Right now, talking with Super Bowl winning head coach and NFL Network analyst Brian Billick. Coach, you've been so generous with your time. Before I let you go, I'm looking for about a 40-foot boat that I can take out when I'm back home in Maryland on the Chesapeake Bay. Can you help me out with that? Because I know you're in the boat business a little bit.
We'll find you one, Invictus Yachts. We'll find something. I'm still in the boat business. The problem is, we sell used boats. It's hard to find used boats when people aren't buying new boats, and because you can't get new boats because of the COVID and the whole thing. So that's we don't have any inventory right now. But you want to do that, young man? I'll get you. And I always told you, buy your second boat first.
Right.
Okay, because whatever you get, you're going to want bigger. So go to that one first.
Get the second boat first. I will. I will remember that. Coach, anything you want to plug? I knew you had a podcast that you were doing with Michael Robinson. It sounds like you have a whole slew of podcasts. Anything you want to plug before we let you go?
I've got one coach to coach that I'm enjoying. I'm visiting with head coaches, assistant coaches, trying to give a voice to a lot of assistant coaches as well. Also got one. You like this? We haven't popped it out yet. We will. I'm doing a fishing podcast called The Coach and the Fisherman.
No.
I got it qualified up front. I don't know squat about fishing. I have a place up in the North Woods near the Canadian boundary waters in Minnesota, but I have access to a whole bunch of guys that know how to fish. It's been fascinating. We're talking muskie and walleye and trout and fly fishing and float fishing and baits and all sorts. It's been great fun. I'm learning a lot. And fortunately, I got some people who know what they're talking about.
When are you doing? When does this come out? And is there a video component to this?
We may at some point. A lot of people have been pushing me to get some pros to come up. My house is on Lake Vermilion. It's God's country, man. I'm about 15 minutes south of the Canadian border, and it's beautiful country, great fishing. And we talked about maybe coming up and having these guys coach me up and doing the fishing, but right now it's just a podcast. It's been great fun. We'll see if I'm about to head back up there. We'll see if I've learned anything from these podcasts and help me with my fishing. You
have to go down to the Keys and get Jimmy Johnson on there. I can only imagine the conversations that you two would have. That'd be fantastic.
There'd be a little beer involved. That'd be great.
He's Brian Billick in the Ring of Honor for the Baltimore Ravens. Won a Super Bowl with them. Now working for NFL Network and in the world of podcasts. Brian, great catching up. One of these times in the summer, I promise I'm going to swing by. I want to go out and have a couple of beers with you on your boat. So we'll get that done.
Man.
All right. Good talking to you.
Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.